Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. So Alec Baldwin is back. He's also back doing a scripted true crime podcast dealing with art called Art Fraud. And, if you think about it, can you tell if somebody's lying? Well, can you tell if art is not what it pretends to be? And that really is a fascinating area, this attempt to mislead people using art that seems familiar to us. It is kind of weird that at the same time I initiated a true crime series on Van Gogh in the Van Gogh series, something I do every Wednesday. Baldwin jumped into the exact same genre. It might just be the time for a change in true crime, the art aspect to true crime. As a matter of fact, the gallery that Alec Baldwin is covering in his series actually had custody of Van Gogh's most expensive painting. It was actually the most expensive artwork in the world at the time it went to auction, and then the same gallery went on to defraud dozens of art buyers in the now infamous scheme. It's actually quite interesting finding out about this Chinese guy how he was using tea and other substances to artificially age some of these paintings. Now, according to an article from Fox News, I'll put a link to that in the description, quote, "True crime stories are what put podcasting on the map, and they remain a huge portion of available content for which the public has a seemingly endless appetite. There are even already existing programs dedicated to true crime in the art world, ironically, on a platform that exhibits no images," end quote. I must say, I do think we need to see and feel those images. I'm a investigative journalist, but also a photojournalist, and I've done quite a lot of art articles for magazines that have a lot of photos in them, a lot of images of artwork that are quite difficult to procure. You've got to sometimes get permission from galleries and so on. And so, but it is very important to have the art next to your narrative, the artworks itself, the visuals next to the narrative. And I do think if you're going to talk about fake art, it's important to be able to see it to know, why it's fake. In the same way that when you're dealing with people who are dishonest in true crime, you really want to see what those micro expressions are. You want to see it, you want to hear it, and you want to kind of get a sense of what is really happening, not based on what someone else is telling you, but also seeing it for yourself. I do think when it comes to covering art within a true crime context, the imagination of the viewer, listener, or reader is pricked way more than in conventional true crime. And I think you can ask that question. You can ask the members who are participating in the Van Gogh series if that's true. Is the art, when you do the art version of true crime or true crime dealing with the art world, is that a more immersive experience? Is it something that engages the senses more than ordinary true crime? Think about a crime scene as kind of being a painting, right? A crime scene has got certain clues and things in terms of the portrait before you. And of course, in modern crime scenes, a lot of those clues are covered over, washed over, removed, etc. So you kind of presented with, in a way, a fake scene in front of you, and you've got to figure out what's missing, what should have been there. So, the deal with true crime dealing with art, I think it touches the psyche at a much, much deeper level. I think because art is inherently creative, artists are inherently creative people, and the people who are touched by that are sort of caught up in that creativity. And then crime is inherently destructive. It's if you talk about art as a synthesis of inspiration, crime is the antithesis of synthesis. It is disorder. It's disturbance, it's jumbling, it's disarranging, it's confusing, it's disrupting, it's destroying, it's dispersing. It is the opposite of creativity, which is destruction. And so I think the subject matter where you have true crime within the context of this creative universe means it is a lot more powerful and compelling. Anyway, going back to that article from Fox, quote, "We welcome all newcomers to the fascinating history and ongoing intrigue of art crime," the team behind the already established and similarly named Art Crime podcast said Tuesday. So they kind of just call it art crime, not true crime, but art crime. But I guess it is true crime dealing with art. That's the long version of it. And they basically just saying that they're hoping their podcast is going to draw people to them kind of by mistake. People who are looking for Alec Baldwin's podcast are going to stumble upon theirs. And I do want to encourage you guys to just go into that area, look around, explore, and you'll see that it really is an invigorating aspect to true crime. It's a different area of it, but it certainly is, in my opinion, it's better. It's very interesting, very, very interesting. And there are some amazing things that we don't know. For example, that Michelangelo, the famous artist, one of the most famous artists in the world, started his career as an art forger. Something else mentioned in the article, which is perhaps worth pausing on, is this comment from Christian Toto, a movie critic. Quote, "I think the broader issue with Alec Baldwin is that if you look at his career and look at what he's said and look what he's done, he should have been cancelled a long time ago," end quote. Now, think about Alec Baldwin also within this context of art. Is Alec Baldwin a true artist? Or is what Alec Baldwin is what he's doing inauthentic in some way, given what has been happening, right? I think one can kind of make the comparison of people in the art world that aren't who they pretend to be, fraudsters and so on, and Alec Baldwin, who's an actor and who is continuing to be an actor, and is what he's doing true, genuine art, given the situation that he's in or not. And I think that's quite interesting. But in terms of this whole idea, he should have been cancelled a long time ago. I want to go off on a little bit of a tangent, so just bear with me. Personally, I find the casual tone of that statement to say, you know what, I think that guy should actually have been cancelled long ago. I find that the tone of that very troubling. I wonder if you guys do too. Maybe some people find cancelling a good and necessary part of the modern era we live in. It's just part of society today. You know, it's and it's actually normal. I find it pretty terrifying. It's the survival, in a sense, of that sort of lynching psychology in the American South. You know, if you feel someone's done you wrong, well, then you just get rid of them. And I think what that does is it perpetuates a tribal, aggressive, predatory mob mentality. Do you think that is good for neighborliness? Do you think that is good for communities? Do you think that is good for countries? We live in a world that seems to excel at being shallow and callous, and yet there's a double standard, I think, where seemingly shallow and callous acts, you might say, well, what happened with the Rush shooting was as a result of shallowness, and the response to, or the whole thing around it was callous. But then where seemingly shallow and callous acts are targeted, aren't they also targeted in a shallow and callous way? Maybe the reason for that is a widespread perception of injustice and corruption. You know, it is out there, we do want to do something about it. Why is nothing happening? That's the perception. I think a real problem with the way the law is configured today is the slow pace of it. A friend of mine was run over by a taxi in early October. His killer still hasn't had his day in court 5 months later. I've heard a trial date has been set for April, but, you know, it'll make it still around 7 months after the fact that something is starting to happen in terms of that case. Cancelling, on the other hand, is instantaneous. But is it right? In the Chris Watts case, Nicole Kessinger was effectively cancelled in what some will say was absolutely justified. No. I consider that a travesty of justice, mob justice laid bare. Because you feel like someone is guilty, you cancel them, you make them guilty. Imagine if someone did that about you. They felt that you did something that wasn't right. But actually, in reality and in a court of law, you didn't do anything wrong. But it didn't necessarily look good. You weren't completely innocent, but you hadn't broken the law. So, if you think about the psychology of cancelling within the long emergency of the pandemic, if you disagree with someone that is actually right, say a scientist or a doctor, and we live in a world where people have different beliefs and different opinions. So what if you don't share someone else's belief or opinion, and they are actually technically right about something? Then where does cancelling actually get you? You're just forming a tribe. And we're seeing this all the time. As the true crime community, we have to be cautious that we do not get so caught up in cancelling, that we don't even end up sort of cancelling ourselves. By that I mean, we're so preoccupied finding out who is guilty and who did wrong and what they did wrong and who deserves a particular punishment meted out to them, that we lose track of our own responsibility in our own lives. We lose track of who we are, what we're doing, what we could do. While you're so busy cancelling someone else, your life slowly cancels away as well. And so I think there's a world of difference between trying to find truth and the pursuit of justice, and that more vengeful, vigilante sort of style of projecting onto someone in that sort of victim mentality aspect. This is why I always try to bring the conversation in true crime back to us. How can we improve? What do we learn from this particular case? So let's not project endlessly the victim mindset that is inherent in true crime from ourselves, back onto ourselves. Consider the alternative to cancelling. What is it? Well, it's creating. It is creating ourselves and recreating ourselves. It is creating a new chapter, a new narrative for ourselves, which is much needed after the restrictions and ruin wrought by this virus for so long. We should not ruin one another. We should not act like a virus, infecting one another with opprobrium. Instead, we should find the antidote to corruption, which is authenticity, which is truth. We should use that not to cancel, but to create a better world. We should use that not to sort of criticize and, again, cancel, but to find a way to think critically about what is not right with this picture, but then not end there. Not just endlessly go and find fault and expose that, but then take our knowledge of something that is not true and find our way to a better truth with the things that are true, the people around us that are true. So we want to create a better world with better people in it. And you don't do that by cancelling people out. And that starts with not somebody else. Creating a better world doesn't start with somebody else. It doesn't start with making sure somebody else gets justice. Making a better world starts with ourselves. And I think one of the things true crime offers is a cautionary tale of how things can go the wrong way, how you can give into temptation, how you can become lazy, how you can start to ignore safety protocols, how you can be reckless, and how all of that can catch up with you, how the chaos of your life can catch up with you, how the clutter of your home can overtake you and consume you. And so you can look at a true crime case and learn from that. But that shouldn't be the end of it. You should then also be inspired to create. And where is that going to come from? Well, often the answer is art. It might be from movies. It might be from music. It might be from an inspiring, heroic hero or artist or personality or a friend. So I'm not going to take it further than that, but I do want to invite you in the very next episode I'm going to put up. I'm going to just be talking about 2 artworks, one of which is disputed. One of those artworks was also regarded as, when it was sold, it was the most valuable artwork in the world. And I want to invite you, if you thought, this art stuff isn't for me, just take a listen to it, just take a gander and see whether you find it interesting. You might be surprised. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.